I wanted to do kind of an update on my journey since I've been learning Blender, specifically the last 5 years where I got really serious about using Blender. And hopefully that within watching that, you can learn something yourself about how to progress your own skill set. My dynamic VFX pack is now on sale at Blender Market, and this has completely customizable VFX assets that you can drag and drop right into your viewport, both Eevee and Cycles compatible. If you're interested, you can also go check out a free sample pack. Also, if you're interested in my Patreon, I have materials, projects, time lapses, video walkthroughs, and discounts available there as well. Now, of course, I'm boring to look at, so I'm going to just scoot over here and we'll have kind of artwork up here the entire time. So for those of you who have been following me on my channel, this may come as a shock, but I actually have more experience in After Effects and 2D motion graphics than I do 3D. I've been doing that much longer. And I decided to try 3D because I wanted to create 3D versions of my characters, thinking that it might be less time consuming to animate for a single artist. And I was able to get a version of my character in 3D, and it looked okay for this one shot, but it took me forever, and I could not animate the character. The animation was so complex, and when I tried to move my character around, the topology and the weight painting was awful, so it just bent weird. I didn't know what I was doing. I felt defeated because I couldn't move forward, and I honestly kind of hit like a wall where I wanted to learn more 3D, but every time I opened it up, it was just too intimidating to try and learn how to do everything correctly. And a part of the reason I hit that wall, I think, is because I did what most beginners do. I started way too complicated. I was excited about the idea of making a short film and that 3D might be the answer, and I just jumped into the deep end before I knew what I was doing and just got lost. I honestly had a hard time opening the software after that until eventually I was just like, you gotta do it because I think this is the answer. So you're going to do an animation a day for an entire week. And I did this little Halloween themed series on Halloween week. And what I focused on was creating super simple characters. Since I was challenging myself to do an animation and a character per day, I could only do what I could do in a day, which forced me to make much simpler characters. And as a result, that forced me to learn the basics. And by going to the basics, and kind of opening up Blender, suddenly it wasn't so intimidating anymore because I was just focusing on those early steps. You can see here, these animations aren't anything special, but for me, they were a very exciting plateau in kind of like my animation career of like, oh, like I can make Blender animations and I'll just kind of focus on simpler stuff I can do now, which kind of leads me into my next phase, which is I tried to create a short film in Blender. And I thought, all right, my computer is not very good, so I can't do these long renders. And I'm not very talented at 3D, so I need to focus on kind of smaller, simpler characters and animations. And this is actually the same character and story that I'm doing in my short film now, which is called Watermelon Girl. And here you can see in the early stages how I was doing all these toon shaders, very simple rigs, very simple scenes. And you can see what it's progressed into now with the knowledge that I have. But what I did not consider was how complicated a production pipeline was and how little prepared I was for all the intricacies that go into creating an optimized 3D pipeline that makes it, I don't want to say easy, but manageable for an individual artist to do. So I ended up creating these animations that I was very pleased with and excited about, but just kind of trickled off as I got overwhelmed by just all the production knowledge that I didn't have in 3D. But here I started using more textures, discovering how to use textures, how to light those a bit better, and I kind of discovered this clay shader on Blender Market, which I've like covered in a video before, and started doing kind of stop motion style animations, as I was always a huge fan of stop motion films. And I was really happy with the results. And this is when I started kind of coming into my own style, which was kind of more this kind of crafty handmade look on all of my art renders. So during this time, I really started focusing on just getting better at lighting, kind of practicing modeling, practicing textures, and I discovered asset packs. And that just never like even occurred to me that like kit bashing was a thing, that I could make the hero elements and then use kind of these asset packs to fill out the background and thus get full scenes quicker. And I know that seems like a silly revelation, but I had this mindset that I had to make everything myself in order for it to count. So by doing this and kind of unlocking this, I started creating much fuller scenes at this point. and really started to kind of progress from just simple characters on a color background to full environments utilizing my characters. So at this point, I had my short film idea that I am currently working on, and I wanted to start on it, but I was really bad at rigging. So what I started doing is just creating a ton of weird little characters. And by creating all these weird little characters, I had to kind of make like rigs that would work for each one. And in the process, ended up learning a lot. So for example, I created some monsters that made it so I had to use weight painting uniquely. And some parts were hard and some parts were soft. And other times I had to learn how to make eye rigs and things like that. And through this process, I really kind of started to develop an understanding for the rigging portion of the pipeline in Blender. It was around this time that people started asking me how I was making these scenes, and I thought, oh, I'll make a YouTube tutorial. And that tutorial just blew up way bigger than I could have ever thought. And I thought, hey, what if like instead of wasting all my time doing this freelance work, I kind of started doing this on YouTube instead, and then I would have more time to learn. So that's exactly what I started to do. And during this phase, you really see myself kind of starting to challenge myself to learn new aspects of the program as I teach them to the YouTube audience. I was encouraging myself to learn by sharing with an audience, and I just want to take a moment to say that I'm very grateful for that motivation that you have provided me with. And yet again, I decided to take another crack at my short film, and I was like, I had this texturing knowledge, and I had this modeling knowledge, and this rigging knowledge, and I started kind of trying to make scenes, and I was like, all right, I'll just build it piece by piece. But as you can guess, I kind of underestimated my abilities. So I could make little characters, I could set up the camera shots, but what I didn't understand how to do was to make environments that really worked for kind of a 3D film set. So that was kind of a limitation I had. All my environments were like small, tiny backdrops. I didn't know how to build full environments. So instead, what I did is kind of revert to focusing on improving my materials and improving my textures and trying to kind of optimize my workflow and creating just really fast materials to kind of build out a scene quickly. At this point, I got really familiar with Blender's shader tree setup and some of their nodes, and then also kind of combining my workflow with Adobe Substance Painter. And then I started realizing that, hey, I can mix and match elements. So creating a face rig in 3D is really hard, but what if I just animated the face in 2D? I've been doing that for, 10 plus years. That would be easy. So then I decided to give my characters a 2D face rig. And out of this kind of like juxtaposition of various skills I had, I started to kind of further develop and hone my style and really kind of figure out my artistic voice. So at this point, I was starting to kind of work on my short film on the side, working on character designs, working on character rigs. And every time I kind of hit a roadblock, rather than getting frustrated and quitting the entire short film, what I would do is stop and turn it into a learning opportunity. So for example, I didn't know how to make environments. It's like, all right, let's learn how to make them in geometry nodes. I'm not happy with the textures on these characters. Let's learn how to use a texturing software. I don't know how to make the hair on this character. Well, let's do a tutorial on hair. And I started using my tutorials and art projects with the audience as a way to kind of prepare myself to begin working on this short film. And then my goal has been to share that short film with you along the way, and hopefully you find that interesting or learn from it. And I have to say that at this point, there's not any big new features that I'm learning. Instead, what I'm trying to do is elevate my skill set from amateur to professional, trying to get better at materials, better at lighting, better at cinematography, better at environments. And this is when I made the Crafty Asset Pack, which had all these handcrafted materials that I could then drag and drop into my own scenes for my short film, but also share within my tutorials and other things as well. So this was like a big turning point, and that I kind of created an asset pack that I could utilize on all my characters. I was very happy and grateful for your participation in purchasing the asset pack, supporting the channel and the short film. Definitely grateful for that. That really motivated me to kind of just like run forward with everything.